And you are listening to Debbie. I am the Dollar Diva, and I have Arwen Becker with us today. Arwen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So if you guys have heard of Arwen Becker, been on YouTube at all, you will see this wonderful woman. She is out there singing the praises of investing for women. And I think Arwen would be the first to tell you that women and men retire differently. Arwen, you work with a lot of families and your practice, and women, we're outliving the guys. So we have to invest differently than men for us, correct?
That's correct. Well, I would say that there's a bit of a caveat, and then a lot of the things that we do are very similar, but they take on a different, kind of a bit of a more unique tone for women than they do for men, just because of what you said, longevity, the fact that we live longer. There's a number of different things that are working against women. So we have some unique challenges that we have to face.
It is hard to think about you being by yourself, the death of a spouse, but I think it's better to be prepared for that. So I always say, we all pass away at some point, and we have to be ready. It's like people saying, I wasn't prepared for whatever. Well, you have to prepare for all kinds of things. We see in our practice, there are strokes, heart attack, a lot of things can end your business career early, and that changes your retirement.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's so many things that we need to prepare for, that really those what ifs or the unknowns. And I think a lot of people avoid them just because I don't know if it's that they don't think that they really can prepare for an unknown period of time that you're going to live, or, what would happen if your spouse passed away, or maybe we just want to avoid that topic altogether. But there are a number of things that we have to look at.
When we look at longevity and money, we're falling short in planning for the worst. We think the best. So how do you calculate how someone needs, what they kind of need in savings to exist, how they calculate how much money they're going to be living on and taking out? Because they may not be vacationing like they did when they first retired, but now it comes to medical expenses and help just living.
Well, good, solid planning. I mean, it is unique for everybody, but, really what we have to do is we have to look at, and anytime we're putting together a retirement plan for somebody, we're solving until age 100, till if you're married, till the remaining spouse is in their hundreds. And so a lot of people are like, why would you plan that long? But what if you happen to be the one that lives into your late 90s? We don't want to fall short and have our money run out. And it's really unfortunate that 80% of widows on collecting Social Security live below the poverty line. And that the sad fact is most of them didn't when their spouses were living. So if that's the case, we need to make sure that both individuals, especially if the woman is going to likely outlive her spouse, we need to make sure that we are pushing the plan and seeing that it works all the way until when she is age 100, not when her spouse might hit age 100, 6, 7, 8 years before her. So making sure that we're looking at those pieces. And then more importantly, and more realistically, what if the younger spouse needed care, some sort of long-term care, and they had to self-fund some of that, and it drained a lot of the assets? Does it leave her with nothing? Is she going to be broke a couple of years following that? So these are all pieces of the planning puzzle that you're looking at as you're putting together a comprehensive retirement plan.
I have a client that they are a husband and wife are in their 60s. Their mom, the mom's mom, the woman's mom, is now 92 and still lives with them. And, she has a small pension and Social Security, but she would not be able to live on her own. She has to live with family. Is that what you see a lot of women doing, living with family at that point?
Oh, gosh, absolutely. I mean, when I give events, I always ask the women in the room, how many of you have taken care of an ailing parent? And usually the hands go up between 50 and maybe 75% of the room have experienced that. And it is just, it's a weight that the majority of women have to bear, because women will inevitably be the one that kind of get put into that role of caretaker, whether it's caretaker with their children, but oftentimes caretaking their children and their parents a lot of times at the same time. And so that puts a huge burden on the women that are right in the middle, that sandwich generation, because it means that she's not putting into her Social Security or retirement plan if she's taking time off to care for her parent. But that is just, it's the true fact that 15% of women's working years are going to be spent taking care of children or ailing parents versus 1.6% of men.
So this woman did the exact same thing. We talked about how they were going to afford, so they're going to sell their home with me and downsize and move somewhere else. And I said, okay, so the husband is self-employed, and because she never worked, she always took care of his business or her parents. She has maybe $500 in Social Security. That's not going to get her anything. And then the mother that she's taking care of has a small pension, but still that's a problem because she's going to pass away. So now this woman so you'd think you'd be worried about the 90-year-old, but she's going to be fine. She's going to be with one of her daughters, and that pension stops and Social Security stops when she stops. So that's fine. But now what am I going to do with the 65-year-old woman that has maybe $500 in Social Security? So now I'm saying, okay, well, tell me about your husband. He's self-employed. What if he has a stroke or a heart attack? You don't have any savings except the equity you have in your home.
Right.
What are we going to do about him? How are you going to live without his job? And she's like, well, I don't know. We've never really thought about it. Oh my gosh. Don't you think 68 is kind of late to start thinking about it? And he has to keep working, but he's self-employed. And I said, well, they might want to move to Florida. And I said, well, he's going to have to get a W-2 job then, because you have to have a mortgage. You have to have some type of income to qualify. And she goes, well, my mom gives us money right now from Social Security to live. And I said, well, you won't have her forever. You've got to qualify on your own. And they looked at me like I was speaking a different language. And I was like, I'm sorry, guys, but you really have to think about how you're going to afford something else.
Right.
And that was the first time the light bulb had gone on. Mid-60s is not the time you want that light bulb to come on.
No, not at all. And, that's probably... I definitely take a lot of that stance too when I'm talking to a lot of women. I'm not here to make this comfortable and easy for you. I need to wake you up to the glaring reality of what you're facing, that there is no knight in shining armor. Nobody is going to be coming and caring for you when you need it the most. If you continue to put yourself on the back burner, make sure that everybody else's needs are met, and then somehow think that you're going to arrive at 68 and those pieces will have been taken care of. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, when we come back from the break, let's talk about healthcare, longevity, and how we can solve for this while we're in our 40s and 50s. We'll be right back with more of the Debbie Dollar Diva show about money and more with Arwen Becker. You're listening to Debbie. I'm the Dollar Diva, and I'm with Arwen Becker today. Arwen has her own financial planning company. And Arwen, we were talking about women, and we age a little bit longer. We stay here a little bit longer than the guys. What can we do? And we want to talk about planning, because when you're 68, 70, that's not the time to plan. When should we really start looking forward to the future earlier? How early is early enough?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I think this is something people should be looking at as they're heading into their 50s. I mean, if we were going to look at optimal time to really start saying, okay, I'm closer to the years of retirement than I am, my working years, really, even though I'm still working. That is the best time, because your health is great. There's so many opportunities still for a lot of great growth and planning, tax planning, a number of different pieces that are great to be tackled in your 50s and 60s. So that is always the best time to start tackling this.
Most women might be working those years, and they're going to say, well, I'm going to keep working. But then you come into play all these variables. They end up staying at home to take care of a spouse. They stay at home to take care of their parents. They may stay at home and be a grandma. And that cuts into their earning potential and their retirement potential.
Yeah, or you deal with a pandemic, which sends 2 million women home because most of them have to handle child care. And so, you never know what might get in the way of that. So, of course, anything we can do to prior plan is best, because then at least we have our eyes wide open. We know where we currently are and what are the best choices that we're going to be able to make. Where so many women find themselves getting in trouble is when they assume they are going to work until I'm 70 or 75 or something like that because they haven't done the prior planning. And then some sort of healthcare event throws a wrench into it. And so most women who think that they're going to work into their 70s, they don't work until their 70s because about 75% of those are affected by some form of healthcare event that ends up causing them to have to retire earlier than expected. And so, yes, anything that we can do ahead of time to be able to give us clear foundation of where are we, and then what are the things that I need to do to be able to get myself where I want to be, where I'm going to be able to still live the comfortable standard of living that I've been accustomed to while I was working.
Well, Arwen, I want to do more. I want more than what I had before, or I at least want to maintain it. And we know everything is getting more expensive. How do you answer that question? I think, a lot of people expect things. They don't want things to change. They want things to stay the same. And that's one thing that's changing now is change all the time. Over and over.
That is in fact true. Yes. But the interesting part is when people do stop working, there are certain areas of their life where expenses do go down. So if you were having to commute for work, you're going to be spending less on wear and tear on your car and less on gas and maybe on clothing that you would have had to buy to go to work or eating out for lunches and things of that nature. So there is a drop in expenses on certain areas. And then, of course, what we're wanting to do is now allocate some money to the pent-up dreams, the things that we wanted to do, but we couldn't do while we were working. So looking at expenses, and expenses are very consistent. When you work with enough people who are going to retire or already retired, you see a lot of consistent patterns. And so being very specific about what you're spending money on, understanding your expenses, what is your cash flow? I hate the word budget, but what are you spending money on? Knowing your cash flow, and that's just a big part of the planning process. Knowing where are you spending your money, and then where maybe some areas that we can tweak along the way, or be able to get a little more income coming into the household throughout different. Sometimes people rent out a room for $500 a month because they've got a bigger house than they need. And that just provides a little bit of cash flow when they're no longer working. So those are just little pieces that we see on how can we solve for some of these little gremlins that come up along the way. But if you wait too long to address them, that's where you're going to find yourself in much more of a world of hurt.
Well, and I don't think anyone wants to rely on their kids, or I know I don't want to put my kids in that position. So you have to start planning now, because things happen. And I think that's the biggest thing. We talk about long-term care. This is the time in your 50s to buy long-term care before it becomes non-issue because you can't even afford it. Tell me how many of your clients come to you with long-term care already? Probably not very many.
Not very many. And we're in Washington State. So now they've passed a law that if you don't have it, you are going to have a payroll tax come out every single payroll that is going to go towards paying for that. So you're going to be paying for it whether you want to or not. So either you need to solve it by getting your own personal policy, or the government's going to assign it for you. So
that's great though, because I know everybody wants to say we want to take care of ourselves. We don't want the government interfering, but we know what happens when people don't have 401ks and long-term care. People don't plan very well for themselves.
Yeah, and 7 out of 10 of us are going to need it. I mean, we want to believe. I'm just the same as everybody else. I want to believe that I'm going to be the 3 out of 10 that won't need it. But we have to be realistic. There is going to be some form of long-term care need in our future, most likely 70% of the time. We will need that. And so either it's going to drain our assets at, $9,000-$10,000 a month, because we're having to self-insure for a facility, or we do the work in our 50s where we have the option of many different types of more inexpensive policies. But there are some things, Debbie, too, that asset-based long-term care is something that we're much more a fan of, because that allows you to retain your principal. So if you don't end up using it, it's not like car insurance. You don't use it and, you never get into an accident and you still, all that money's gone. But with asset-based long-term care, the insurance company will guarantee to at least give you your principal balance back. If you, one, decide, I decided I don't want this policy, they'll refund that principal balance. Or two, if you never needed it and you passed away, then that principal balance goes to your heirs. So there are ways to do it that aren't like the traditional long-term care that gets so expensive as we get older. And if we don't use it, it's kind of a use it or lose it type of scenario. So there are different options out there that aren't just the standard, which people most of the time think of.
Sure. And then same thing with life insurance. You cannot buy that term policy and wait for that term to expire before you flip it into something that's more beneficial as you age. Right.
And, term insurance is really good for certain seasons and for when it's solving certain issues. So if it means we have that term policy up until the time where we know that our house would be paid off, then we don't need that anymore. It's not necessarily just for a death benefit. It's for if something were to happen unexpectedly, would I still be able to pay off that mortgage? Or, if we were doing something for college funding or, there's a number of different things to do. But yes, when it comes to our health and what we would be able to apply for and get the best rate on, yeah, absolutely. Now is way better than 10 years from now because there's no guarantee in 10 years you'd even be able to get it.
Right, because once you have a heart attack or a stroke, or I had a client that had a liver transplant, that just kicks you out of so many opportunities in the insurance world because you're uninsurable at that point.
Yeah, or it's so expensive that it's just not, it doesn't make sense.
Arwen, you tour as a speaker as well. How do we find out more about you? Because I know you're all over YouTube. I went and stayed for quite a while the other night on your channel just listening to you talk, and you espouse off great information that I don't think women like to listen to, just about money and finances and what happens if they don't like to go down that road.
Yeah, but I try to do it in a way that's at least encouraging and inspiring because I know that same feeling. So they can find me at multiple different places. So our retirement planning firm is beckerretirement.com. And we have multiple advisors. We work with people virtually. We work with people in Washington State, out of Washington State. And then my training company and keynoting is Life with Arwen. And Life is an acronym, Leaders Inspiring Financial Empowerment. And that's where all of my media, my podcast is called She Handled It. And that's where there's also dates and times and all the things having to do with my speaking and other media.
And you've got a new book. Tell us really fast about the new book.
Yeah, so my book is called She Handled It, So Can You, and an inspiring and empowering financial guide for women. And it's really written to women 40 and above, and it just talks through a lot of the different financial pieces that we all have to address. But I do it in stories, so it's way more interesting. It's through a lot of my mistakes. I talk about being attacked by a cougar. There's all sorts of great stories in there, so you can pick that up on Amazon.
Okay, Arwen, if you had one message to get out there to women in 30 seconds, what is that message?
Don't wait. Get the education that you need and start getting it now. Believe that you can do this. You are more than enough. And you just need to be willing to pick up a book and start getting educated because you can do this.
It is simple math. Compound interest works really well if you start early and just follow through with your plans. Arwen Becker, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Debbie. Appreciate it.
Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through AE Wealth Management, LLC. AE Wealth Management and Becker Retirement Group are not affiliated companies.